In the present, there is constant change, and so much we cannot control. If you try to micromanage it all, you lose even greater control in the long run. The answer is to let go and move with the chaos that presents itself to you. From within it, you will find endless opportunities that elude most people. The greatest fear people have is that of being themselves. They want to be 50 Cent or someone else. They do what everyone else does, even if it doesn't fit where and who they are. These two quotes are from the 50th Law, awesome book by Robert Greene about 50 Cent. What I like about those two quotes and the way they work together is that by putting them together in that way, I'm able to acknowledge that, one, the world is a chaotic place. And the irony of it is that as it becomes more chaotic, the more people try to take hold of it and make sense of it. And what they're very likely to do when there's chaos is to try and mirror what other people are doing. What they do is they look for a roadmap. And the fact is that there is no roadmap. And what worked for somebody else is very unlikely to work for you. So, kind of ironically, in that spirit, I'm going to be answering some questions that people submitted to me yesterday. And I hope that as I answer these questions, you judge them against your own intuition, that you don't simply take them as gospel because there is no gospel, and that you take it more as a compass than a roadmap. So, first thing, some of you guys will notice. One, I opened up this. Some people asked, what's in there? The answer? Knowledge. Also, I kind of stepped up my game as far as the visuals. The whole rise and grind thing. I don't know. I thought that was cool. I'm totally copying that from Damon, the guy from Shark Tank. He's got a book called Rise and Grind. But I liked it, so I took it. Fucking sue me, Damon. All right, so to the questions. Okay. So the first one I'm going to answer is from Avery. And her question was about how to build a good template for Facebook paid posts. And I think, first of all, you have to decide, what do you want, right? What action are you trying to get these people to take? And who are they, right? Are they people who are already familiar with you and what you're doing and they're already kind of signed on? Or are they people who don't know you yet, right? And you're trying to grow your audience. So first, I think deciding what you want is important. The rest of this is irrelevant if you don't know what you want them to do. Once you decide what you want, you have to create a compelling story and then use as few words as possible to introduce that story to your audience. So this is you creating the copy for whatever your post is going to be. You can get away with a little bit more when you're cultivating your existing audience because they already like you. But if you're trying to grow your audience, it's different. They don't give a shit about you. And they will have they'll have barriers when it comes to being advertised to. So if you pop out the gate and you say, hey, we posted a new song, or hey, we've got like shirts, or we're playing a show, like people who are, this is their first interaction with you, they don't fucking give a shit, right? So the best thing to do with people you're trying to grow your audience into is to start off by telling them a story and doing that as concisely as possible. So you start with really attractive copy. Like what you want to do is have it be concise, be short, and be kind of a hook into the longer time frame story that you're trying to tell them, right? You got to get their interest first. Think of it kind of like a headline, right? You want it to grab the attention. So come up with a batch of those kinds of whatever phrases, even like one sentence is going to be ideal, I think. And then you put a bunch of, well, you basically gather together a bunch of visual content that is kind of the next step in that story. So we're talking still images, we're talking still images, but as slides, video, of course. You compile all that stuff together, right? Trying to just, again, tell whatever story that you're trying to tell. And then the next step is you throw those two things together. You throw the copy that you wrote and the visual assets you compiled. You combine them in different ways and mix it all up. And then you post those as paid ads with very modest budgets. And then you analyze the results. You know, I think what we have to be conscious of is sort of what I mentioned in the beginning, is that there's no roadmap for this. You know, what's going to work for me is not necessarily going to work for you. So what you have to do is start down the path of learning what works for you. What are you good at? You know, you want to, like, because maybe I'm really good with words. I'm great with words, but as far as the visuals and stuff like that, I'm not as good. And I believe in doubling down on your strengths versus trying to make up for your weaknesses, especially if you don't have a team where maybe somebody else is strong where you're weak. So if you're relying on yourself, just double down on what you're already good at. And you're going to know that certainly better than me. So leverage that as much as you can. But this sort of test and optimize approach is so much a part of my strategy, because what works today might not work tomorrow. And equally as important as the results that you get today is you building an intuition and a skill set around this so that you can judge ideas against that intuition in the future. So that's kind of my answer to that. Create your own template, right? Based off of what you're good at and what resonates best with your audience. Let's see. I took down some notes because I'm much stronger in written form than in kind of freestyle, off the cuff form. So in order to deliver as much as possible, I took notes. Okay, the last part of this is that really, like, there are frameworks out there for this kind of thing. Indepreneur is, and I talk about Indepreneur so much because I genuinely believe in the product. They have they're a music marketing education platform. I mean, it's right up your alley. I mean, you're asking me about, you know, how to create good marketing campaigns for music. Indepreneur has the most comprehensive education on that, in my opinion. You know, I've talked about them a bunch, and I'm sure people are sort of tired of it. But, you know, I think it's helpful for you. So I'll talk about it one more time, and I'll send you a link to it when I'm done with this. Okay, so next question. Clemen, how should I approach a new release with my band? We have an EP upcoming. I had to get some clarification from him because I wanted to know whether or not singles were going to be a part of the release strategy. And he told me, yeah, there's going to be some singles. So what I would do is, I'm big on like creating milestones and then documenting your progress toward those milestones. So what I would do is treat each single release like a milestone and then create content that leads up to, in this case, the the release of that single would be the milestone. So you would create content that's like talks about the writing process or the recording process or what the song means to you, yada yada yada. All those ideas that the most enthusiastic member of your band pitches, and then everybody kind of poo-poos. I'm saying do that stuff, right? So come up with content like that. Use that as a way to sort of scale into the release of the next single, and then do that over and over, each time sort of giving this story up to this next release. Next, on a broader time frame, be releasing content about the album as a whole. And this, of course, will involve paid ads, and I think it should also involve you collecting emails and or collecting messenger contacts, so getting them to connect with your page as messenger. If you haven't set up ManyChat yet, you should, because you'll start getting all of these people who have subscribed to your, subscribed to your messenger, and then when you start having these releases come out, you can broadcast it to everybody at once. And I'm not going to say it bypasses the algorithm, but it's a different communication mechanism where like 100% of what you send out through Messenger will get delivered. And then I think I have like a 90-something% open rate on Messenger. So it's a hell of a lot more effective than trying to keep everybody educated through their Facebook feed, because you don't, on top of that too, on top of it being more effective, it's also free. So that's what I would do. Create short stories that lead up to the release of, damn it, I keep hitting that. Short stories that lead up to the release of each single. Collecting emails however you can, maybe sort of referring back to what I told Avery to do. So collecting people's information up, at each sort of stage, and then, like I said, on a broader time frame, be talking about the EP release. Then after that, you have to think about, okay, well, what's the next milestone? The next milestone after that is probably a release show of some kind. And then you document your progress towards that release show. And I'll say it's more important to be entertaining than be factual with this. So even though you guys might not necessarily be, rehearsing several times a week for the show, it doesn't hurt to take a bunch of photos and then release them in sort of to schedule the release of that content throughout the week. You don't necessarily have to say, oh, hey, we're rehearsing today, fucking whatever, but sort of be smart about how you're releasing the content. But ideally, if you guys are, really working hard and you're actually preparing for that show, somebody should be working on something every day. Just get them to snap a photo or take a video or whatever. Drop that maybe into like Google Drive, or if you use Dropbox, have them drop that into Dropbox. And then whoever's managing your social media content will release that however they see fit. That's what I would do. And of course, leveraging paid ads is going to be big, but also having a focus on the story you're telling and collecting the emails and the messenger contacts is, in my opinion, it's vital because it's so much more effective than paying to reach your audience through their feeds. All right, what else we got? Oh, something I should say too. I talk about daily content a lot, and when it comes to like the documentation, whether it's the short, sort of on the short time scale, which is like releasing each song, or on the broader time scale, don't overthink it. It's more important for you to show up and talk and build relationships than for you to have something that's like, got a super high production quality. It would be better for you to show up every day with shitty content than for you to show up once a week with like good content, because shitty is subjective. Like what you think is boring, what you think is sort of mundane, your number one fan is fascinated by. You know, think about if your favorite band every day showed up to give you a window into the behind the scenes of the band. I mean, you would probably like that, even if it wasn't all like 3-point lighting and high level cinematography. You'd be like, oh, okay, this is cool. So I think we're a lot harder on ourselves than we need to be, because there's somebody out there, if you're doing good stuff, like there's somebody out there who loves what you're doing, and showing up every day to serve those people is just a good idea, because it's those people who care about you and don't need the production quality to stay tuned that are going to make your career long term, because they're the ones you're actually building genuine relationships with. If people just show up every time you make something huge, those people, I think they tend to be lower quality audience members, because they tend to be very much about like them and what they want, and they only very rarely seem to be about supporting you. So I think it pays to be thinking about who you're talking to, and just be a little bit less critical of what you're putting out, right? I think that a lot of that is rooted in insecurity and feeling like, what you have isn't good enough. But the truth is, like, if somebody really likes you, and certainly anything is better than nothing. Okay. Any of you guys who are just tuning in, you didn't see this, but check this shit out. What? My buddy Ross took that picture. Isn't that fancy? Also, if my daughter ever breaks in here and needs me for something, watch this. What? I'll be right back. Nice. Okay. All right, so we're back. Not that I left. Okay, so Marcus asked about Bandcamp versus Soundcloud. The pros and cons of each, and the best one to build a lasting fan base, in my opinion. Okay, so some of the cons of SoundCloud is that if you're not in like rap and hip hop and that kind of scene, the audience may or may not be there for your genre, right? If you're playing death metal, or if you're playing, indie acoustic stuff, I mean, your audience is most likely not there. I mean, the term SoundCloud rappers is so widely understood that if it's that obvious, it's just something to take into account, right? So one, maybe the culture isn't there for your type of music. There are a lot of bots on SoundCloud. The monetization on SoundCloud is kind of complicated, maybe overly complicated, especially if the people who tend to like you aren't there. There are a lot of, those are some pretty strong cons, in my opinion. The pros are, if you're a rapper, then your community's there, and you might do well. Again, like I said, SoundCloud rappers, that's a thing that pretty much most people in music have heard before. So if you're good, it very well might be the place for you. But there are obviously some cons there. The pros, it's a good place to post things that aren't quite finished. The culture that is there, they're okay with things being like rough drafts, where I think on Bandcamp, by the time it gets to Bandcamp, it probably needs to be a finished product, right? Or at least some version of a finished product. You may do different versions, but it needs to be pretty damn good by the time it gets to. They're less. Let me say they're less forgiving when it comes to things not being good on Bandcamp because people just won't buy it. With Bandcamp, some of the cons are the biggest con that I've seen is Bandcamp doesn't have much for community functions. People, as far as I know, are not really using Bandcamp for discovery, where on SoundCloud, discovery is more of a feature. Again, but if your audience isn't there to begin with, then it doesn't really matter because they're not discovering anybody there because they're not there. But that one drawback of Bandcamp is that it seems to me that it's unlikely that many people will discover you there. If they did add community functions to Bandcamp, I think it would be better. But right now, it just isn't there. But I think, to be fair, like, it's difficult to compare both platforms, right? I mean, Bandcamp is, it's like a store for official releases that are, like, considered done, where SoundCloud is like, you could do like it's more quick. There's single tracks, demos, that kind of stuff. It's more of a social network than Bandcamp is. So what I would say, just to cover your bases, try both, analyze the results, and then just decide if it's something that was good for you or that you need to keep doing. That's the only thing I can say. But those are the pros and cons, at least the top line pros and cons that I can think of. Hold on, my daughter's here. Hey, are you taking me somewhere? Are we going somewhere? Are you hungry? Okay, I might make her a sandwich real quick. So I'll be right back. Oh, I get to use the be right back screen. Okay, I'll literally be back in like a minute or so. Let's go make a sandwich! I made it back. She didn't want a sandwich. She wanted a drink. Okay. So anyway, so that was my kind of rundown of Bandcamp versus Spotify. I think they're just different things. Bandcamp is definitely more of a marketplace kind of thing where you go and you sell shit. SoundCloud is more of a social network. So you just have to decide, like, okay, what are my goals? Does the community of either platform, is it there? Am I able to reach my goals through that? And it's just a judgment call, but that was kind of my rundown. What else we got? Okay, so Eric asked, how concise does a band's image / aesthetic need to be? Okay, he went on. It's a couple months after an album release. No new material coming anytime soon. What do you think are good ways to see some new numbers? Okay, so kind of two questions. Okay, so as far as how concise does the image aesthetic need to be, I think there's different levels. For me, I like to see bands that have solid photography and who have good recordings as far as like pillar content. So like your profile photo, your cover photo, I think both of those things need to be good. Having photographs of you that are flattering, that maybe you hired a good photographer to come in and take photos of you, of your show, whatever. I think having some of that in there is super useful. It helps certainly level up people's perception of you. I mean, if you were smart enough to have an awesome photographer come out and take photos of you, that of course bodes well. But then also it's aesthetically pleasing. But I am far less critical of daily content than I am of like pillar content like profile photos and cover photos and that kind of stuff. When it comes to daily content, just show up, right? Just show up and be you. It doesn't have to be, in my opinion, perfect. It doesn't have. I'm not showing up to, I'm not looking for perfection in day-to-day interactions. I'm just looking for, who are you? Do I like you? Are you communicating your why? Do I care about that why? So I'm far less critical of daily content, but I think having your sort of top-line content squared away is useful. I mean, nothing kills the first impression of a band for me than them having what I think of as like a shitty looking cover photo. Either if it's a photo, or it could be some type of graphic thing that they had designed. If it's tacky or it looks crappy, the first impression matters, right? Because we make permanent assumptions based off of those first impressions, and it takes a lot to come back from making a bad first impression. So I think that it matters, but it matters different amounts for different pieces of your overall image. And then let's see, what was the next question? Okay. And then the second question, okay, so about no new material coming out, what are good ways to see new numbers? Creating daily content is huge. I've said 2 to 7 pieces of content per day. That helps a lot because you're showing up every day in front of your audience. Now, that being said, you don't have a new release coming up, but you should have something that you're working towards, right? If you're being active, if you're being serious, you should have things coming up that are that you're working toward, or else, I mean, it's hard to get your numbers up if you're not doing shit, right? If you're not actually doing any work, then it's hard to kind of drive those numbers up unless you're going to lean really, really heavily on paid ads, which is fine if you have the money for it. Cool. But if you want to do it inexpensively, then the way to drive up numbers is just by showing up every day and being entertaining and telling a really good story, and then using your personal pages to help amplify the reach of your page, or at least start building up your own personal brand so that people will give a shit when your band does release something. That matters. I think being conscious about the fact that what you post on your personal Facebook has ramifications when it comes to your band, and those can be positive or negative. So if you're showing up every day on your personal Facebook, I've argued before that if you own a business, there's no such thing as a personal Facebook because they both crosstalk. But if you show up every day to be entertaining and have interesting conversations and create stuff that's like brand appropriate for you and your project, that can also help a lot too, because certainly my reach on my personal Facebook is a lot better than my page, and since I haven't really dove into doing paid ads on my page yet, I make an attempt to at least have the personal page feed the business page, kind of. So that's what I would do. Show up every day, leverage the use of your personal account, but be smart about it. Like, nobody wants a fucking sales pitch. Nobody wants to be advertised to. If you're being obvious about it, people will just start to tune you out. So just show up every day to be entertaining, to be interesting, to strike interesting conversations, to tell a good story. And that's a really great way to drum up your numbers. Go figure. If you bring value to others and you make them think and you entertain them, your audience will grow. I think that's pretty obvious. So, all right. Those are the questions that I'm going to answer today from the ones that were pre-submitted. Let me see if there's anything else that anybody asked. Jay, Jeremy, Christian, Tommy, Yuri, Tommy, Chad, Alec, cool, Bobby. What do you guys think about this? Is this cool? I don't know. I was mixed on it. I didn't want to be Ty Lopez and be like, look at all my books. But I really do like to read. And it's a bunch of different stuff too. Like I got Roots. But then I also have a bunch of like corporate books, like Strength Finder. And I've got 2 copies of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If anybody wants wants one of them, you can have it. It's a good book. It's like transformative. Like it'll like change your fucking life. That's how good it is. Maybe that's why I have 2 copies. Anyway. Okay. What did Tommy say? Say do both. A lot of record labels. Okay, so a lot of record labels. I see what Tommy said. So Tommy said, I say do both. A lot of record labels. If you do throw a demo a few ways, ask for a SoundCloud link in my experience. Triumphant is one I can think of off the top of my head. Hardcore record label. Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I definitely say do both. There's no reason not to. You know, you're not so pressed for time with the band. Like you're not working 12 hours a day on your band usually. I mean, there is a point of diminishing return, especially like, I mean, even if you're practicing your instrument, it's like there comes a point where it's like, dude, you definitely need to let those muscles rest. So you have the time. You certainly have the time to do both. And if you're trying to get signed to a label, which I think most of you shouldn't be, most people who are watching this are nowhere close to entering a conversation with a record label in a way that actually makes sense. But if you are to that point, maybe having a SoundCloud link is useful. Certainly, like I said, there's no reason to not have it. But I think any record label that's in a genre outside of rap and hip hop, like any label that prioritizes your SoundCloud or super, super critical of your SoundCloud numbers is maybe a label that you shouldn't be that interested in. Just because having a following on SoundCloud in genres outside of rap and hip hop is kind of, I don't know. It's difficult. I think there are better places to build audiences for most genres than SoundCloud. But that doesn't mean don't do it. Like I said, I mean, what I say isn't gospel. What the fuck do I know? But just my intuition tells me that anybody who is prioritizing those numbers outside of rap and hip hop, they probably just don't know what the fuck they're doing. Because, you know, what if your SoundCloud numbers are low, but you have tons of interaction on Instagram? Or, I don't know. I mean, I'm certain they would take it all into account, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. What I would do, frankly, is find which platform works best for you. And then this kind of goes into doubling down on your strengths, but find like which platform feels most natural to you. For me, it seems to be Facebook. Create a shitload of content for that platform. Squeeze every ounce of juice that you can out of it. And then the content you create for that platform, then repurpose that for what I call ancillary platforms. Like, so for me, it would be Instagram, Twitter, which I barely use Twitter. It's more like just a posting mechanism just to be there. YouTube is kind of the same way, where that's going to be changing soon with the podcast. I'm going to be releasing the podcast actually through an established channel that has a decent amount of subscribers. So that should be cool. So I will have to start making content that's specific for YouTube. But still, point being, my pillar platform is definitely Facebook, and then I create a lot of times it's micro content for the other platforms. YouTube can be a little bit more long form, but like certainly Instagram and Twitter, it's more micro content. But so I think like any label that's worth their salt will be able to see, okay, so this is their strong platform. This is really where they've built their audience. And just because they don't have huge numbers on some other platform, it's not really like, it's not a huge mark against them. Like I have like no interactions on Twitter whatsoever, but it doesn't mean that I don't have an audience that's valuable. It just so happens that my audience is primarily on Facebook. So, and I think like in the end, honestly, what they should care about is how much money you make. Like the label should worry about, are you guys profitable? Do you have a dedicated audience? Who is that dedicated audience? Does that audience match the label's audience? And then if we put X amount of dollars here, what's the output going to be there? So, I think it really, while they may ask for a SoundCloud link, what they're really going to be interested in, what does your cash flow look like, and are your guys' audiences compatible? So yeah, I definitely agree that you should do both. Okay, so Christian asked, what are the best ways to get a first release out there and to build up hype around it? Oh, also my office space looks awesome. Neat. Thank you. I believe in growing projects slowly, or at least being willing to be patient with how you grow them. So my formula for a first release, and I don't know if this is I'm going to assume that's the first release of a new project. What I normally say is to create first kind of guess what your pillar platform is going to be. So like, let's assume that you assume that you're going to do well on Facebook, for example. Put together a Facebook page that looks presentable. So, get a profile photo that looks good. It could be a graphic, could be logo, whatever. Put together a cover photo that looks good. Fill out the information on the page enough so that it looks dignified. And then take the song that you're wanting to release and do I guess it'd be kind of a soft release. And then share that with 10 people who who will actually check out the song, first of all. But then they also have to be people who share the same stylistic preferences that you do. This is basically your target demographic, right? It's the people who are like you and who like the same stuff you do. Then analyze the results first with those 10 people, and maybe even ask them questions like, what did you think of this? How far into this song did you feel the need to change it? If you had like a video done of some kind, like maybe a lyric video, what did you think of the lyric video? Blah, blah, blah. Gather information. Maybe a Google Forms thing would be useful there. Of course, these have to be people you know. Most people are going to tell you to fuck off if they don't know you and you're asking them all this stuff. But so do the soft release and then analyze the results. Like, okay, did people like it? Okay, great. Did it, whatever. But then more importantly, look for, did anybody share it? Without you asking, not be like, hey, would you be willing to share this? But just see if anybody organically shared it. And then if they did organically share it, then you're onto something. Then you start getting into the whole marketing aspect. You start showing up every day with daily content, telling a story, either telling the story about the song you released or telling a story about some milestone that's coming up, which may be, you're recording an EP, or you're recording a new song, or you're releasing a song that you already had recorded, or whatever. Like once you have established that there's the high probability of a need there, then you start the whole marketing mechanism. So start, of course, with the daily content, but then, of course, start looking at paid ads and putting modest budgets toward that to start sort of testing out, sort of like how I talked about with Avery. Start testing out what types of storytelling work best for you. Like maybe you've got awesome photography, but you're really shit at video. So maybe leveraging still images is better than making video. I think that's probably unlikely. I think video tends to be much better than still, but whatever. The point being that you have to analyze, like, okay, what do I bring to the table? What am I naturally good at? And then sort of distilling all of your shit ideas down to the handful of really good ideas you have. And then coming up with like quantifiable ways to be able to distinguish the good ideas from the bad. I think that's probably the best way to approach it. Test it small scale. Once you've established the need, blow it up. That's pretty typical. Companies do that shit all the time. You test with a small focus group, get feedback. I mean, that's what beta testing is. Test with a small group. If it's good, then you fucking blow the shit up and you start showing up every day to bring them value and to showcase your content strategy. So, okay, so Tommy said, grab a copy of Real Artists Don't Starve. I like that title. That's something that Chase Jarvis talks about a lot, where it's like the idea that you need to be a starving artist to be successful. Like, it's romantic, but it's not really smart, right? And I've said that I think that if artists starve, it's because they want to. You know, it takes a lot of discipline and consistency. Well, a lot of the time it takes a lot of discipline and consistency to actually be successful long term. It's not about making some Hail Mary attempt and then washing out each time, you know, something doesn't work out. The best thing to do, in my opinion, and I haven't read this book, so I don't know if this is the point that they make, but the best thing to do, in my opinion, is set up your life so you're not worried about paying your bills or whether or not you're going to be able to eat, or so that if something, you know, bad happens, you're facing financial ruin, right? Because bad stuff, you know, sometimes people have bad luck and you know, your car gets a flat and you got to buy a tire, right? Having the money to be able to take care of that takes some of the stress off your shoulders, right? And then for me, nothing kills my creativity more than financial stress. So if I know that my finances are taken care of and that I'm good, it really frees up my mind to be creative. And I know that that's a lot of people. So the idea that everybody should be going all in and work a job at Starbucks. Well, Starbucks is a bad example because they pay pretty okay. But like, you know, work a part-time job at McDonald's or quit whatever job you have entirely so that you can go all in on this music thing, even though you can't provide for yourself financially. It's just bad. It's a bad idea. Like, set yourself up so you're not worried about money. You know, the whole idea of needing to go on tour to make it now is old-fashioned. Like, it doesn't really make sense. You know, in a world where everybody has a smartphone, like, it's a totally rational approach to lean heavily on digital marketing and digital content creation versus playing empty bars every weekend and taking tours where nobody shows up. And as a result of that, not being able to get a decent, like, paying gig to support your life. Like, you don't have to do that. You know, starving is optional now. Certainly more optional than it was, because maybe in the 90s you had to go on tour to get to build your audience, but now nada. Most audiences aren't built on the road. They're built on cell phones. And we can debate whether or not we like that or not, but it doesn't really matter because I think that the data plays out that that's quite true. How many companies do you know that go on like road shows to like showcase, hey, we made this widget? None. Pretty much all of them are using digital marketing, and perfectly fine. You can do that from your home, and you don't have to have a shitty job, just so you can support some low or no income tour opportunities. So I think it's okay to build your life, especially those of us who are getting older. Like I'm approaching 30, and I've got people who depend on me for, food and shelter and stuff like that. So even if I did want to be in a band, and I know there are a lot of people who are in that boat, their life turned out that they've got kids and a house and a wife and all that stuff. And too many people give up on their dreams just because they have that. They're like, well, I'm a dad now, so I've got to give up on all my fucking dreams. And it's not true. Like, being a good father, this is to all the dads out there, doesn't mean only putting out the short-term fires with your family. It means not only being an ATM, but being a fully realized person, right? The best thing that you can do for your child is to take care of yourself, because if they see you taking care of yourself and scratching your itches and being creative and excited about your work and setting up your life so that you can be all of those things, your child is going to want to do that too. And there's really, I think there's really no better gift than that. Teach them how they can be happy, right? Don't teach them that their only job is to make money. Teach them that they can create a life for themselves that they enjoy. And that's one of the best things that you can do. So I think it's foolhardy. And I think a lot of people give up way too soon simply because they have kids in a house. And it's like, you could leverage, the internet to much more than you could before. And there are people all the time who create successful businesses from the internet, and they do just fine. And even if it's just a side hustle, even if you still keep your job, but you're filling yourself up on the weekend touring, or I had somebody say, be a musician who plays like a stand-up comedian. So like primarily Fridays and Saturdays. That seems reasonable to me. There's no reason I think that you should have to be, that everybody should have to want to be all in on the lifestyle of going out and being on tour and taking solar showers and shit like that. Like, certainly it's very reasonable now to be able to do it online. And, anybody who judges you for that can go fuck themselves, because they probably don't matter, Cool. Okay, so I have more stuff I need to do, so I'm probably going to hop off here. And there are questions that I didn't quite get to out of the, there are questions that were submitted to me that I didn't quite get to. The reason for that is because I'm preparing for some of these questions so that I can answer them comprehensively. Like I said, I mean, I'm much more potent in written form than in word, but I recognize that a lot of people like videos, they like the live stuff, so make my best attempt at that. But I want to give answers that are actually quality answers, or at least as quality as I can give. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an attempt to answer all of the questions, but the ones that I didn't get to, the only reason I didn't is because I didn't have the time to do the preparation that I wanted to answer them. So anybody whose questions I didn't answer, I promise I'll get to it. But anyway, I'm going to get off here. I ran out of coffee. Well, I almost ran out of coffee. I need more. I've got some writing I have to do. I woke up late, so I woke up at 6, so I lost 2 hours. So, again, I'm gonna get off here, and I hope you guys like this kind of setup because it's the way it's gonna be now. So if you don't like it, I guess you can